Loading. And we are live. Today is an energy and climate day. I think it's going to be mostly an energy day on this podcast. We're going to be talking about the unfolding energy crisis in Europe, the global rebound in coal, and what we should expect in the U.S. if our leaders continue down this path of pursuing unreliable energy. Talking about all this and more on episode 329 of the In the Tank podcast. All right, welcome to the In the Tank podcast. As always, I'm your host, Donald Kendal, and joining me today, we've got Jim Likely, VP of the Heartland Institute. How are you, good sir?
Doing good. I'm wearing my flannel shirt today because it's very, very cold here in the Chicagoland area. And like our president, I am not going to overpromise, but I will probably outperform what anybody thinks will happen on this pod today.
Oh, yeah, we could talk about Joe Biden maybe a little bit later if we have time.
God, I hope so.
Linnea Lueken, research fellow for the Arthur B. Robinson Center on Climate and Environmental Policy. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. It's not as cold here in South Louisiana as it is up in Chicago, but we're supposed to get potentially some snow tomorrow. So I'm really looking forward to the road apocalypse that's going to happen with the 3 flakes that come down.
That's right. You could expect all commute times to triple. And lastly, the audience was calling for it all last episode. Your wish has been granted, everyone. It's none other than Isaac, the man, Orr, policy fellow at the Center of the American Experiment. Isaac, hold for applause. I assume everyone listening is applauding in their cars and homes. Oh, I could hear him. Hang on. Wait for it. Wait for it to go down. Okay, now how's it going, Isaac?
Audience, your prayers have been answered. I am back on the In the Tank podcast.
That is right. It only cost me a theoretical lunch somewhere down the road when Isaac and I meet up at some point in the future. So
that's correct.
Like I said at the top of the podcast, this is going to be an energy-centric episode. A lot of crazy stories in the realm of energy. But first, before we dive into any of that, I want to give a bit of an update on the poll that we discussed in length last week. So if you missed last week, we talked about a recent poll we commissioned through Rasmussen to survey people's support on an increasingly authoritarian, a list of increasingly authoritarian restrictions on unvaccinated people. So the results were stunning, to say the least. If you have not watched last week's episode, you should. To quickly summarize, the poll found that about half of likely Democrat voters supported every draconian proposal from a vax mandate to internment caps for unvaccinated people to fines or imprisonment for people who question the efficacy of vaccines in public. That support dropped to about 30% of Democrat voters when the question was about taking kids away from their parents if their parents refused to get vaccinated. So, like I said, we went into depth in these findings last week, so check out last week if you want to see more kind of commentary on all of these findings. But I wanted to give a little bit of an update. So when we do,
that was a great poll, by the way, Donald.
Oh well, thank you.
Tremendous poll. It had bigly appeal across the board.
Absolutely.
People sent me this. They're like, "Oh my God, look at this poll." I was like, "Oh, Heartland Institute commissioned that. Good work, Donnie."
Well, yeah, thank you so much.
Your boss John Hinderecker wrote about it on Powerline too.
Oh, beautiful.
I will be his boss soon.
Oh, shot fired.
Good thing he doesn't listen to the pod. That's good.
Exactly.
Well, just like kind of a little behind the scenes when it comes to this, it's a complete crapshoot when we release a poll like this, whether or not people will care, whether or not people will report on the results of the poll. In our experience in doing these polls, we've seen the entire range. Some results that I thought were interesting, they were just completely ignored by the media and just, everyone at large. And then some results that have gone basically viral. I think this poll has received the most attention out of any of the polls that we've ever done under the Stopping Socialism Heartland umbrella. The Blaze dedicated an entire segment to the results. Same with Louder with Crowder. Charlie Kirk talked about it. It was discussed. This is my personal favorite on the Ron Paul's Liberty Report. They talked about it in length. That was sweet. We saw coverage from Breitbart, Washington Times, National Review, Town Hall. A ton of people were tweeting about it. Jim, any notable people that I forgot to mention?
Clay Travis, who him and Buck Sexton kind of took over the Rush Limbaugh spot in the EIB network. He posted about it on his website called OutKick, which is a non-woke sports site that I think all of our listeners, if they're sports fans, should definitely put on their list of things to check out. But he did a quick video about this yesterday, and it's just being picked up everywhere. And Donnie, you came into the office. We talked about this earlier this week, and this is I liken it to like the so-called 97%, right? So the climate alarmists, they just have this statistics in their head, right? 97% of scientists agree, and it's just this thing that is in the conversation. It's kind of in the subconscious of people who are climate alarmists, the so-called 97%. This poll is now in the subconscious of everybody on the right. Is getting there, where they'll just say things like, half of Democrats want to put you keep you locked in your home if you don't get the vaccine. Half of Democrats think that if you talk about, if you publicly question the efficacy of COVID vaccines, you should be fined or put in jail. And so the brilliance of this poll, it's extremely difficult to insert yourself into the national debate in such a way. But this poll, actually, we should thank the Democrats for this. Democratic voters, 1,016 of them, who responded in such a way that it revealed that half of this country, I suppose, is interested in the most draconian COVID tyranny possible. And as you said, Donnie, as you and Justin and Chris were starting to come up with these questions for the poll, you guys were bouncing off ideas of what is the craziest thing that we could say that this should be justified because of COVID.
Right.
And apparently there's nothing actually crazy enough concerning COVID that the Democrats will not a majority of support.
Yeah, we had one question that didn't make it to the final cut. Maybe we'll use it in the future, but it was like, how many boosters are you willing to get before you just throw up your hands and be done with it? But that didn't make it to the final cut.
That's good.
Linnea just saw that Daily Wire, looks like they talked about it. That's Ben Shapiro's group, right? So they talked about it.
Yep.
Crowder, I was listening to Crowder, and this is to Jim's point. They did an entire segment on it. This is a couple of days ago. And then the next day, he referenced those results just offhandedly, not because it was part of the segment, just because he recalled it from when he brought it up. So yeah, it's kind of transcended into just the vocabulary of people on our side of the aisle. And you couldn't wish for better results than that when it comes to these things getting picked up.
Yeah. And I go ahead, Isaac. Sorry.
30% of people favor getting rid of your kids if you're unvaccinated. Like, that to me is definitely like the biggest one.
Yeah,
that's crazy.
Clay Travis focused on that on his video at Outkick, because he's not vaccinated and he lives in Tennessee, which is a free state, not in Illinois like we do and live in lockdown world. But, he's like, my God, 30% of Democrats want to take my children from me because I don't have the vaccine. I mean, that's one of those crazy things. There's no way. There would maybe be 10% of people would say this. It would be just some kind of really radical fringe. Nope. Almost 1 in 3 Democrats think that that's a good idea. And that should be public policy, by the way. That's what they think. And, some of these restrictions that we had put in the poll are being done in other countries. That's kind of why they got in there, to see what people are thinking about these things, like Australia and France and Austria. They have these extremely draconian laws, and that they are otherizing people who are not vaccinated. And that's like, that's the path that the hard left goes to. That's frankly the path that communists go to. That's what, the Soviet Union did, is like, if you're not with the program, if you're not down with the Soviet project, you are otherized. We're going to exclude you from society until you finally can't take it anymore and comply. And what's really interesting, and I shared this with Donnie and other guys here at Heartland earlier this week, on Saturday, the Salt Lake Tribune in Salt Lake City, Utah, which went heavily for Trump in both the 2016 and the 2020 elections. It's not exactly, Vermont we're talking about here. This is a pretty conservative place, but apparently their newspaper is a wild left-wing crazy newspaper, because they had written an editorial on Saturday. It was published on Saturday the 15th. And it talked about how basically they were upbraiding their Republicans, basically the Republican congressional delegation and Republicans in the state legislature, for not doing more to crack down on on the unvaccinated, basically. And it did all the liberal tropes on the vaccine. It said that the people that don't trust the vaccine, want to buy into the idea that you can bleach your blood, or you take horse dewormer and all this stuff. So every left wing trope that's BS about what people who have questions about the vaccine believe are all in here. But they actually said near the end of the editorial, and I'm going to read this word for word from the editorial that was published Saturday in the Salt Lake Tribune in Salt Lake City, Utah. Were Utah a truly civilized place, the governor's next move would be to find a way to mandate the kind of max vaccination campaign we should have launched a year ago, going as far as to deploy the National Guard to ensure that people without proof of vaccination would not be allowed to, well, go anywhere. But it may be too late for that politically and medically. Whoa. So this is a major mainstream media outlet, the largest newspaper in the state of Utah, advocating for what we had in our poll, independent of even seeing the results. I'm certain of that. Well, that this is the kind of thing, I used to be in the newspaper business. They wrote their Saturday editorial probably Thursday because they want to take the weekend off, right? So this was done as our poll was coming out. I'm sure they didn't see it, or they might have actually referenced it and applauded themselves for being on the front of the cutting edge of these
30% isn't high enough. We need higher numbers.
That's right.
70% of our voters don't want to take kids away from their parents.
Those are rookie numbers.
Those are rookie numbers.
But let's be very clear here. This is a major mainstream outlet advocating for the creation of a police state against the unvaccinated, against people who, for whatever reason they have, don't want to get the vaccination. And again, I think even Biden said this the other day. You're not now considered fully vaccinated unless you've had the 2 shots plus the booster, and then probably in another 6 months a second booster for 4 total vaccinations. And so it's stunning, and this is actually proof that our poll, or I should say evidence, not proof, but this is certainly strong evidence that our poll is not some kind of outlier crazy poll. This was done professionally by Rasmussen, and the fact that a major media outlet basically endorses the most severe thing we had on our poll is good for the accuracy of the poll, and very scary for anybody who believes in freedom.
Right. Pure coincidence that this article was released in the same week that our results were released. It's like it perfectly illustrates what we captured in the poll. And if you have any doubt to the accuracy of the poll, just look at that. I think that's Exhibit A. Exhibit B, go on Twitter for like 2 seconds. The amount of hostility against anyone that chooses not to get vaccinated is unbelievable on that cesspool of a social media site. And you could also go on Reddit, a very popular website. There is a subreddit that is dedicated to celebrating the deaths of people who are unvaccinated. It's called the Herman Cain Award. I'm not even joking.
Oh boy!
Oh my God!
These people are sick. Absolutely sick.
There's lots of weird Reddits or subreddits, though. So
there's
one called The Empire Did Nothing Wrong, where they talk about how in Star Wars the Empire was the good guy standing up against religious zealots. So let's not take any subreddit too seriously.
Well, I will say that they do exercise some discretion on what they allow on that site. The Donald Trump fan site on there got kicked off because they were anti-police. This is like years ago. So they do exercise some type of, discretion on what they allow.
Well, we better get section whatever it is out there ready to roll, Donald, right?
Yeah, section 230.
That's right.
Linnea, do you have any comments on this topic before we move on to energy stuff?
Nope, just that there seems to be a rumor going around that people who are not vaccinated cannot fly domestically. I'm not vaccinated, and I've been asked by several people now how it is that I travel for work when I don't have any shots. And I don't know why the media is telling people this, but that's another one of those bizarre things that they can just get away with saying, and people just believe it.
Well, as somebody that generally doesn't like traveling, I endorse that myth, and I hope that it spreads more rapidly to keep me from having to go on planes. Go ahead, Jim.
But if you have to travel, you should travel to the United Kingdom. because the UK, Boris Johnson just announced yesterday that pretty much all vaccinate or all COVID restrictions are off.
That's right.
No more masking up kids in school. In fact, no more mask mandates for any restaurants or any public places. They're going full back to normal, apparently, in England right now. And so again, this is
they have
one thing.
Elections coming up or something.
Yeah, Boris Johnson is going to have an election pretty soon. But
is that right? That was a wild guess.
Yeah, but you, me, and Chris, Donnie talked about this the other day on how do we think that there will be people always wearing masks in America? If you think back to the bird flu and the SARS, we'd see clips of people in Asia, China, Japan, other places, wearing masks everywhere they go. If you go into an airport for the last 2 decades or so, or at least decade and a half, you would see people wearing masks in airports because they were, conditioned that way in their home countries. And I think there still will be people in America that will be wearing masks in airports, that will be wearing masks on airplanes, but there's going to be a very small minority, I hope, very, very soon. And we're going to look at those people the way that we should look at them, as people who are mentally unstable. They should perhaps get some counseling. They should get over their irrational fear of this, but we're always going to have it. But hopefully what's happening in the UK now, maybe that's the first domino of many that's going to fall. And then it's going to be like the fall of the Soviet Union. Nobody thought it would ever happen. And then it all happened at once. And so hopefully that's the, if you want to be hopeful, that's what I think about. And with a hope in my heart will happen to the world when it comes to COVID restrictions.
And it only took 2 years.
Interesting. Okay. So the craziest thing about that Utah editorial, Andy, if you could bring this up, I looked this up right as we were talking about it. Utah has the 3rd lowest death rate per capita of COVID of any state in the country.
They want to keep it that low. If they want to keep it that low, even if that means, bringing in troops. You know what? Here's a better idea for maybe the person that authored that op-ed can have a follow-up one. Here's a bright idea. Why don't we just station military in everyone's homes? Just everyone has to, just have one military person in their homes to make sure
that's a Third Amendment problem, Donald. We don't put up with that
Constitution. Here. We can get rid of that.
It's the least controversial provision of the Constitution, Donald.
Well, it's getting pretty controversial now. So, all right. Well, do you want to move on to energy topics? Anyone got any last words on this? Hearing nothing, let's move on to our topics at hand. So, European energy crisis. This has been a topic that's been on my radar pretty much ever since we covered that one New York Times article. This is, month and a half ago, titled "A Scary Energy Winter is Coming. Don't Blame the Greens." So the article,
Thomas Friedman.
Yeah, we went into depth in this. It's one of the craziest articles that I've seen in a long time. The article acknowledges how messed up the energy market is in Europe. It acknowledges that people are going to freeze to death during the winter. And then the author says that this is a result of COVID more than anything, and how we should stay the course in pursuing a 100% renewable energy agenda, something along those lines. So between this condoning of completely avoidable deaths, mixed with another article that we covered, which was from something called Boston Tech or something like that, where they were basically saying how we just have to learn to live with intermittent blackouts. So I started to get really worried about the state of our energy systems across the world. Before we get into some of the specific articles that I have here, Isaac, any comments off the top before we dig in?
It's going to get better or worse before it gets better. So
yeah.
little shining optimism on a hill there for you, Donald.
Yeah. So a bunch of the stories that I have, I found thanks to Isaac's Twitter account. If you're on Twitter and you're not following Isaac and you care about energy stories, it's a lot of precursors here.
Yeah,
but,
exactly.
You should follow him at the Fracking Guy.
For the tens of people listening to this right now,
yeah,
who care about my
all those categories.
Yeah, right. Who may, yeah, exactly.
So the first article that I have here is a Bloomberg piece. It is titled, "Europe's Governments Face a Reckoning as Energy Prices Surge." So the article starts off saying, Europe is gripped by one of the worst energy crunches in history, forcing politicians to step in as soaring prices threaten to leave millions of households unable to pay their bills. So just stopping right there real quick. This is exactly what I predicted would happen. I've been saying on this podcast for probably more than a year now that the government's actions in regards to COVID is basically just a roadmap for what they're going to do for climate change. I'd have to dig through our previous episodes, but I know at some point that I said that the governments would just start giving people money to pay for their energy bills when they were artificially increased because of government's actions in dealing with climate change. And that's apparently what's exactly happening in Europe right now. So anyways, the article continues. But with market forces signaling that the crisis will last way beyond the winter, the dilemma facing leaderships is that their stopgap measures are unlikely to be enough. The cost of electricity and gas across the continent already looks like one of the biggest challenges facing nations as they navigate their way out of the pandemic. Ministers in the 5 biggest European economies, Germany, the UK, France, Italy, and Spain, have so far come up with a patchwork of grants and time-limited tax cuts to help consumers heat and power their homes. Indeed, the common thread seems to be to hope the problem goes away while also leaning on more companies. Electricite de France SA shares plummeted by a record on January 14th.
God, you must have aced French in high school.
I never took French.
Yeah,
as the French government confirmed plans to force the company to sell more power at a hefty discount. Gas more than tripled last year, and energy companies, analysts, and traders all say that high prices are set to persist, already a key driver in the now rampant inflation. So despite the New York Times acceptance that people are going to be freezing to death, it's much harder for politicians to be so callous and keep their positions in power. So they resort to throwing money at the problem. But this begs the question, Isaac, what's causing the problem in Europe? Why are things so out of whack? What is going on?
Yeah, so lots of different problems that are kind of all splashing together to create I'm not going to say perfect storm, because that implies that this was not kind of the logical outgrowth of all the bad policies that they've been implementing for the last 20 years. But a lot of it does stem back. I think you and Justin talked about this as part of the Great Reset and Build Back Better, right? Because every country was talking about Build Back Better for a long time. So during the pandemic, they said, oh, well, we want to stop investing in fossil fuels. We want to starve capital to those. And we really want to use this as an opportunity to kind of start from a fresh slate and invest only in renewables or whatever green technologies happen to be the flavor of the week at that time. So what that did was it did a couple of things. It made them very reliant on the sustained output from wind and solar, right? So they put a lot of eggs in that basket. They also stopped investing in their domestic natural gas production in Norway and the UK, which reduced the supply, obviously. And they become more and more dependent on imports of liquefied natural gas from the United States and imports from Russia as a result. So, bad things happen when you shut down your reliable coal and nuclear plants and hope the wind blows and that Uncle Vlad is feeling generous. That's essentially what's happened here.
Right. They just have to get down and pray to the wind gods. Linnea, thoughts on any of this?
Sure. Well, we've known for a long time now that Germany has been dealing with the brownouts and rolling blackouts, and that California often points to them as some of their inspiration for their energy policy. California and Texas, too, to a point. I mean, they're doing their absolute best to do the worst grid design that they can. After last year's big blackouts in Texas from the ice storm that made all of the solar panels not work because they can't work when there's snow on them, and all of the wind turbines not work because they can't work when they're frozen still. They decided in the last year that what they wanted to do to fix that problem was double or triple the amount of wind and solar that is in Texas, which, 3 times 0 is still 0. So you're not going to help when all that infrastructure doesn't work the next time there's a severe problem with it. Trying to divest from fossil fuels is something that a lot of major banks are trying to do as they're trying to push this green energy idea. It's so unbelievably dumb that they've put
Yes. Don't feel bad about saying that. It is stupid.
That
Like,
they've put all of their
up
eggs.
Stupid.
You know, there are so many different, you know, other than burning fossil fuels, which I would never encourage people to stop doing. Other than that, there are so many alternatives for energy that are not wind and solar, and they picked wind and solar. It almost seems like it's because they are the worst and the least effective out of all of them.
Donnie,
I mean, there's
you
just...
wrote a piece about that like 8 years ago when we worked together now.
Yeah, that was like one of the 2 op-eds I've ever written, was basically like the reason that they want these energy sources is because they don't work. And yeah, but we don't have to go into all of that. I've talked about that a million times in this podcast. But like, how much further down the road is Europe as a whole compared to the United States? I mean, because we talk about the United States a lot. Obviously, we're in the United States, but you know, California, New York, they're always kind of our target practice when it comes to bad policy stuff. But like, just in general, how much further down the road is Europe than the United States? I'm asking you, Isaac.
All right. Well, I wasn't sure. Linnea would be perfectly capable of answering that question too, Donald.
Okay, Linnea, same question.
It's bad. It's bad, but they seem to be doing an okay job of ramping up their coal power production facilities again, as they suffer from rolling blackouts and brownouts, and people are starting to get fed up with it in Germany specifically. So they seem to be trying to roll it back a little bit. But considering the amount of investment that they've already put into their green infrastructure, I'm not sure how much that they can reasonably do. And Isaac, you want to take?
Yeah, absolutely. So Europe is quite a bit further along than we are. I mean, during COP26, that was the climate thing. England had to ramp up the few remaining coal-fired power plants that they had because the wind wasn't blowing. So otherwise, they would have had power interruptions and it would have been really bad. So basically what's happened is no European country is really trying to pursue hydraulic fracturing. So therefore, they've basically made it impossible for them to have their own domestic supply. Germany is keeping the lights on by burning clean, beautiful coal as the most hilarious.
Clean coal.
There we go. Love it. Great work on the soundboard. Andy.
The most successful sound drop in the podcast history, I think.
Oh my God. I love it. And deservedly so. But basically, they're using natural gas as the fill-in fuel for when the wind isn't blowing and the sun isn't shining. And, once you destroy a coal plant, you can't ramp it back up. So it's really hard for them to kind of hedge against the increase in prices from natural gas. That's why you see Europe is shutting down a lot of their manufacturing. So like natural gas prices have come down a little bit from their peak because gas prices are so high that they're calling it demand destruction. So they've shut down their fertilizer production because nitrogen is a large consumer of natural gas. They're shutting down aluminum smelters. They're basically doing all of the things that you can't do and still have an industrial economy. So this is basically the Green New Deal that we've been prescribed in the United States. And it's, it's a lot worse because they're just not as smart as we are.
We just have to segment that last quote and keep that on tab. But yeah, I mean, there are some macro stuff. Isaac, you said demand disruption. We have covered on this podcast before, like China, for example. They're trying to get their hands on as much coal as possible to keep their lights on over there. So surely that's driving the price up of coal. And we could talk about the coal's resurgence in a little bit. But between that and, you mentioned Russia, they're being put in a really nice position where they could basically just control the market. It's like those things are exacerbated, or those things are exacerbating the problem, these self-inflicted wounds for them pursuing policies like this. And it's just, like you said, it is like a perfect storm. Just in a scenario where you are the one creating the storm.
It's a perfect storm of entirely foreseeable consequences to the actions that are taken at the time.
Yes,
Uh,
doesn't
yeah.
really roll off the tongue as well. Go ahead, Jim.
Well, yeah, I mean, they call energy the master resource for a reason. I mean, it's the underpin. It underpins everything else, the cost of everything else in the economy. I mean, literally, your energy cost is the number one cost, and it ripples through absolutely everything else in the economy. And as you mentioned, Europe is ahead of us on this nonsense, and so we can see what is happening in those countries like Germany. Germany was like double stupid, right, Isaac? I mean, they got rid of their coal plants, and they also got rid of all their nuclear plants because of Fukushima, as if there was going to be a tsunami that was going to take out
Germany.
That was the dumbest thing. They're actually building another coal plant in order to make up for the fact that they closed down their nuclear plants. But
they shut down half of them, right? They shut down like 3 out of the 6 that they have operating in the country or something.
Yeah, there were a lot more operating before 2011 when Fukushima occurred. But the Green Party in Germany has been trying to shut down the coal plants for a very long time. And they're basically completely gone. Or sorry, nuclear plants. Green Party's been trying to shut down the nuclear plants. And they've basically like had 100% success in that endeavor. So it's just great that the people that are the most politically active in terms of their love of the environment are the ones who are pursuing policies. They're the worst possible thing that you could do. From an environmental standpoint.
We have a question here in the comments saying, how are electric cars getting their energy to recharge? So I know that there's a lot of proposals in the United States to, shift our fleet of vehicles to more electric, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Is that, I mean, I know that Europe's got more mass transit systems, but is there similar pushes in Europe to have electric fleets of cars and all of that?
Oh yeah, they're going to ban the sale of the internal combustion engine here. Like, yeah. Like Europe, I think it's something like half of new car sales were EVs last year. I'd have to look into it. But it's a pretty substantial number. I mean, it's not as big from a fleet-wide standpoint, obviously, but
sure.
They're going to have the same problem California has, right? California says you could only buy an electric car after 2035. And then it's like, please don't charge your car between 2 p.m. and 10 p.m. because the sun is setting and our solar panels aren't working.
Right. Yeah, no, it's crazy. I mean, just reading that article where it was talking about how, some of these countries have experienced like 50% to 100% price increases for the energy bills. And they were talking about the price of gasoline, like spiraling upward and all of that. And it's just like the energy price bill, in terms of charging your car, doubling, that's a big chunk of money. Like that's kind of crazy to think about that. So thank you for that comment. Sir. But anyway, so yeah, subsidies for consumers, refunded tax credits, leaning on companies to sell energy at a discounted rate. Some countries are exercising price control measures to lower prices of energy, all things that will either temporarily paper over the problem or exacerbate it. So
yeah, when have price controls not worked, Donald?
I don't know. Wasn't there there was a mainstream article recently that was calling for price controls, or at least questioning whether we should do it? I think it was Time Magazine or something like that. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but yeah. So we're talking about all these tried and failed policies again, because that's, what happens when you get desperate. But anyways.
Well, look, leftists try to repeal the laws of economics all the time. And to try to do it in the energy sector is actually quite dangerous for people's health, to be honest, and for not to mention the health of the economy. I mean, the laws of supply and demand are inviolable. Let's just say we're not talking about energy, we're talking about meat, right? Beef.
Yeah, big meat. It always comes back to big meat.
It always comes back to big meat. Yeah.
Oh man.
Right.
Wow.
All right.
You guys are so immature.
I know.
Go ahead.
So anyway, so you can afford to buy steaks or you can't afford to buy steaks, and there's only a limited amount of steaks that can be made, and so the market will figure out how to price the steaks so that enough is made for the people who can afford it, and there's not too much, there's not surplus steaks that they can't sell. That's the way the law of supply and demand works. In the energy economies in Europe, and what we want to do, apparently what Biden wants to do here in the United States, is to just artificially limit the amount of steaks that you could make. And so what if we made 100 steaks a year, and now this year we're only going to make 50 steaks? The price of those 50 steaks is going to be double what a price of 100 steaks would be. What these countries are doing is they are artificially limiting the amount of power that their countries can generate and give to the people. And so of course, if the supply is limited, the costs go up. If it's more expensive to make those gigawatts of energy, that's passed on to the consumer. So then you have all these stupid schemes like price controls or subsidies. What you could do is just let the energy system, let the energy economy find its own level and just generate enough power for what is necessary for our emerging world. And the fact that we're doing all of this while mandating electric cars, while everybody has more electronic devices plugged in today than they ever did 10 years ago, and that takes more energy to be able to do, it's living in a complete fantasy world, to the point where you think maybe that's the point. Maybe the point is to make people suffer. Maybe the point is to take more money out of their pockets and make us more miserable. Maybe we're more easily controlled that way, because energy gives people freedom, whether it's a gallon of gas in your own internal combustion engine car, or low energy prices so that you have the freedom to do other things.
Yeah, well, I think at the very least, it makes you more dependent. All of these people, that first article that we were talking about in the energy topic, where it's like, now people are going to get money from the government to pay their energy bills. Now you're dependent on the government. But yeah, I was going to say, counter to liberal talking points, companies generally aren't out there solely to screw consumers. For the most part, they're trying to provide goods and services at the lowest cost that they can manage based on price signals and supply and demand. So when the government starts meddling with those natural signals, bad things happen. So the next article I have is also from Bloomberg, titled UK Energy Crisis Deepens as Council-Backed Supplier Fails. The article starts off saying a UK power supplier backed by local government council collapsed, adding to the political fallout as Prime Minister Boris Johnson's administration grapples with an energy crisis. Together Energy Retail Limited was part owned by Northern England's Warrington Borough Council, leaving taxpayers potentially on the hook, and supplied 176,000 domestic consumers. More than 4 million households have now been affected by suppliers failing since the crisis started in the summer. And as consumers brace for steep hikes in their bills, pressure is building on governments to act. So, Isaac, I'm no energy expert, but this seems bad. What is your take?
It is not good.
Yeah.
So this is really kind of an outgrowth of what we've been talking about before in terms of England shutting down their coal plants and not being as, independent when it comes to having their natural gas supply. So England's basically been using natural gas to generate the electricity that they need when their offshore wind turbines aren't blowing. And this summer, all the talk was they talked about global stilling, how global warming might be reducing the wind speeds out in the North Sea, right? So
that's awesome.
There have been people who've disputed whether global stilling is happening as a result of CO2 emissions, but regardless, the wind cannot blow for an extended period of time. The underlying cause isn't really as important as the fact that England under Boris Johnson, he's continued this. Like, he's not good on energy. He's actually really bad on energy. But even though they say that climate change is going to change the weather patterns, they are making an electric grid that is entirely dependent on weather patterns. Like, it is like Linnea said, this is the dumbest thing you could possibly do if you're concerned about CO2 emissions. If you care, build a bunch of nuclear, dust your hands off, call it a day, and just move on with your life. But that Michael Schellenberger said progressives don't like that because you don't have to completely reorder society to do it.
Oh yeah, that's another one of those things that I bring up all of the time because I think that is a cornerstone to this thing. I wanted to pull up okay, here it is. So this is a list of all the failing suppliers that have collapsed since this crisis took hold and all of the consumers that are affected by it. It's like, this seems like a systemic problem and not just some one-off company that wasn't doing their books right. Like, this is crazy. This is crazy town banana pants. I said it. All right. I said it.
And the sun would just glisten the hair on my legs.
Oh, is you doing a Biden impression?
I thought that's what you were doing.
No, I forget what I'm making a reference to. I'll think about it when Jim or Linnea are talking and giving their comments on this topic.
dog-faced pony soldiers just going bankrupt over across the pond.
Yeah, but no, it's just, I don't know. Like this just seems crazy. And you don't even like really hear about this stuff unless you're looking for it. Thankfully, like I said, I follow Isaac on Twitter and he follows some good people and he retweets these articles. And that's the only reason why I see this stuff. Some of the stuff I see, I take a screenshot of it and I have to find it later. Just, for this show, but like it doesn't come across my Google feed. It doesn't come across any of the Reddit pages that I do look at that aren't the Herman Cain Award. It just doesn't, like, the only time you ever see Germany and energy pop up in the headlines is like those one unicorn moments when they actually have a negative price for energy. And people think that this is like some sign that we're like, we've breached past the age of scarcity and into abundance, when in reality that's just a sign that their system is flawed and they literally have to pay people to take their energy. So it's like, it's not something that should be celebrated, but that's the only time you ever see this topic. So I feel like that's kind of the reason why I wanted to dedicate so much of this episode to what is going on in Europe, because like I said, if we continue this path, if we go down the same path as them, this is the future. This is the ghost of energy future right over there in Europe across the pond. So Linnea or Jim, comments?
We're always only just a few years behind Europe when it comes to these kinds of policies. Sometimes it's that we're just in step just behind Canada, which is our hat, and we shouldn't be listening. We shouldn't be listening to what they want us to do. But I wanted to comment on what Jim was talking about earlier. I wrote an article recently about the new clean future standards for vehicle emissions that the Biden administration just finalized and rolled out starting in 2023 through 2026. And the EPA acknowledges that the standards that they're asking for are going to significantly raise the price of vehicles for people. And when people mention this to the EPA, their response was, well, it's actually a good thing because then more people will take public transportation. And so
real quick, I know that you were making a point with your bumping your leg against the desk.
Oops, sorry.
But it doesn't translate as well on audio only. But sorry,
I'll let you guys know that Canada is larger geographically.
I thought I turned it down.
Canada is larger geographically than the United States, so calling it our hat, I don't know if that's appropriate. I think that's offensive to our brothers and sisters. It is a very big hat.
To people of my generation, that would be Doug Dimmadome. Owner of the Timsdale Dimmadome size hat compared to the U.S., but, it still works.
I think 90% of Canadians live within 1 hour's drive of the U.S. border, so they're basically our,
all the good ones live in Edmonton. In Calgary.
Well, Isaac, you had a proposal to like adopt Manitoba or something like that.
No,
right?
Alberta. It's the Texas of Canada. It would be great. I would be willing to trade Minnesota, where I live, for that, and America would prosper.
Yeah, politically they're much like Texas. They reject all this nonsense that's going on.
Yeah, but they're like, I don't know, they're Canadian conservatives, so they're probably like, oh yeah, independence, now give me my health care. Like,
yeah.
So Isaac, what do you think?
Terrence and Phillip.
Based on all the state policy that you keep an eye on, whether it's in Minnesota or Wisconsin or California or something, what do you expect the response will be from the government as they face these deepening issues? Double down?
Oh, absolutely. Like they're not gonna be like, oh, I guess our preconceived notions were incorrect. We should probably reevaluate our strategy here.
Let's not use logic here.
No, they won't, because New York just implemented a natural gas ban. New York City did, so they're not going to hook up new customers for natural gas home heating. They're considering doing that on a statewide basis. California, you have a lot of the same things going on there. So in California, they're saying we're going to ban the sale of new small engines that use diesel or gasoline. So
like talking about lawnmowers and leaf blowers and stuff.
That and backup generators. Oh, right. Great. So like the amount of diesel fueled generators has like gone up significantly.
And when are the sales of those most common? Anyone?
Probably right after a blackout. I would
Or
imagine.
right after some type of like disaster or some giant
Yeah.
storm, or when people need it the most. Like, oh my gosh, that's ridiculous.
Well,
Yeah.
it's like with Linnea. She lives in Louisiana. Now, hurricanes come through there all the time. If they had mandated electric
once a week.
cars, how the hell are you going to get out of there when there's no power for a week because the hurricanes just knocked everything down?
That's actually a good point to mention. I was at a meeting the other day where a candidate for lieutenant governor was speaking to us and telling us that there were people who were leaving New Orleans who were driving electric cars to try to get out of the way of the hurricane. It took them 9 hours to make the 2-hour drive from New Orleans to Lafayette to get out of the way of the hurricane because they had to keep stopping to recharge their car.
Ugh.
Because you're idling, you're sitting in traffic, and then you're turning your car off and restarting it over and over again, thinking that's going to save your battery. And it's just, you can't make it. It's a serious hazard. And then all of those batteries, when they do get swamped, and they end up floating off into the bayou somewhere, that's not good for anyone either. So it's
I'm pretty sure those batteries don't biodegrade very well. So.
Not nicely.
No.
So the question on that is, like, what if your car gets stuck in traffic and you're blocking up a whole bunch of other people who have internal combustion engines? Like,
yeah.
Thankfully, you can probably push the car off the road if you need to.
Not in Louisiana. That's the thing that people need to understand about South Louisiana roads is that many of them are actually elevated like bridges rather than actual roads. So there's no shoulder or anything. It's just a bridge with no way off of it.
You just need to lift the car and throw it over the bridge so everyone else can get
That's
out.
what they would have to do, right into the gator swamp. And
we would do that in the Midwest.
What are those things called on the front of trains where they like the cow like pushers or
like a brush guard, but
yeah, just put those on the front and just plow through all the stalled electric cars on your way out of a disaster.
Is it a cow pusher? Is that what that's for?
I don't know.
You are literally describing the world of Mad Max because that's just going through and knocking everybody off.
That's the world we have to prepare for if we pursue these terrible policies. So yeah,
somebody get on the drum.
Yeah, but like,
I don't know. I don't think those.
Isaac's got the flamethrower guitar and everything.
But I kind of don't think that those Mad Max vehicles were electric. That's just my gut, though.
No, but I think I love it when we have these conversations about energy because I don't think it's something people give enough thought to.
Cowcatcher, go ahead.
Cowcatcher, there you go. I don't think this is an issue people give enough thought to. I mean, they live their lives, and right now, you can get gas and put it into your internal combustion engine vehicle, and everything is just fine. Sure, gas is about $1.50 or $2 more than it was a year ago, but it's still there, it's still available. My gas station doesn't generally run out of gas. Everything is just fine. And this is all going to happen very quickly and almost all at once. You're just going to wake up one day and your car is going to be the last gasoline car you'll ever be able to buy because they won't sell them anymore in your state or maybe even in the country. And this is happening, as Isaac said already, in countries like Germany. I'm sure France will do the same thing. And, our policymakers, our politicians don't think these things through. They're virtue signaling. They're trying to appeal to the left-wing environmental wacko part of their electorate. Or they have another, there's another global agenda that's at play here, something like the Great Reset, perhaps, in which controlling the population by limiting the amount of energy, but thus limiting their mobility and independence is really important. So it serves that kind of an agenda. But yeah, you're gonna one day there's gonna be people that find themselves are not going to be able to escape a hurricane in their electric vehicle, and then they're just stuck, and then they're on their own, and the price of everything is going up because energy prices are going up because we're making artificial scarcity. Mm-hmm. And people just assume that this is not going to happen, that it certainly couldn't happen here. Yeah, let those flaky environmental green hippies have their electric cars. I don't care. I'm still going to have my Ford F-150. For now, you'll still have that truck, but there's no guarantee. And we just keep moving toward this future in which you have no choice in the matter anymore because what you thought was normal yesterday, tomorrow is going to be illegal.
Yeah, I mean, you brought up the Great Reset. I can totally foresee a scenario in which ESG standards are crafted to make sure that any company make sure that they don't have any gas-powered vehicles in their supply stream or whatever the terminology that they use. And it's like you don't even have to pass laws anymore. All of this stuff could just be pushed through these types of infrastructures. But
well, that's the mechanism, right?
Right.
Like the Great Reset doesn't have to be some like tinfoil thing that you talk about. Like, it's just like these people came together, they, you know, established these ESG guidelines, and they said, well, you know, whether that's the European Bank saying that they're not going to finance fossil fuel projects in the developing world, that's really what it boils down to. You have a bunch of, you know, big banks in the United States that own a lot of utility companies, and they're deciding that they're going to retire their coal plants before the end of their useful lives. So really, ESG is a giant problem that, you know, you were ahead of the times on that one as well, Donnie. Like that modern monetary theory, you're really kind of a savant.
That's right. And I'll take all the credit because Justin's not here to take any of it. So,
well, let's give Justin grief. We haven't given Justin any grief so far on this podcast.
That's a good point. Unfollow him on Twitter.
Yeah,
that's number one.
Cancel
number
Justin.
Yeah.
Write to Jim Lakely and ask that Justin be removed from employment at the Heartland Institute.
Yeah, these are free things that you could do that don't take much effort.
That improve society.
So in addition to my question about, you know, what are governments going to do in response to all of this, my next question is, what do you suspect will be the response from citizens that are affected by these terrible things that are causing their energy prices to skyrocket, their energy bills to double, gas prices to spiral out of control?
We'll do it live.
Isaac, I'll go to you first because you were the one that was constantly talking about the what is it, yellow vest?
Oh yeah, baby,
movement in France, and that was based on a 30-cent tax increase on gasoline. So, what's going to be the response when, you know, from the populace when this stuff gets out of control?
Oh, I think that's coming back to France. Like,
yeah,
absolutely, yeah. In the United States, people will just leave the crappy states and move to states that are better. Like, they'll leave California. Hopefully they don't move to Texas because Texas doesn't know what they're doing either. But more New Yorkers will move to Florida, and, you know, the cream will rise to the top and the rest will curdle.
Right.
Go
ahead, Linnea.
On that topic, how long until the United States of America is just Florida and a few people living in states outside of Florida?
Right. They're like, we keep telling you Florida's going to be underwater if climate change persists, and everyone keeps moving there. I don't know why. Yeah, I don't know. It's seems like Isaac, your first comment on all of this, I think, will ring the most true as we continue to keep an eye on all this topic, that these things are going to get worse before they get better. But one thing that was pretty interesting, and I got a couple of articles in the show notes if people want to get into more in depth than we will in the remaining 8 minutes of this topic, but the resurgence of coal. So we talked about in the past, I think I already referenced this, that a lot of companies are scrambling over each other, especially in Europe and Asia, to secure coal. China is grabbing as much of it as they possible to keep their lights on. So this has resulted, just across the world, a bit of a resurgence in coal. So I found this one article, again, thanks to Isaac. It was shared by somebody that you followed, from Axios. And the original title was talking about coal's rebound, but they changed the headline of it. Now it just says U.S. greenhouse gas emissions jumped in 2021. So they took out the mention of coal's resurgence, which I thought was very interesting. But yeah, Linnea, you sent me some articles about all of this too. So maybe do you want to kind of take us through some of the highlights of this occurrence?
Sure thing, if I can make sure that my mouse isn't too loud as I do this.
Yeah.
But yeah, so the more you have all these blackouts and brownouts from trying to use these unreliable energy sources, the more countries are moving back towards coal. What we would like to see is more U.S. coal use, not only to bring back a lot of the jobs that we're missing from Appalachia and Wyoming and states like that, but also because our coal is just kind of better than than that in Germany and stuff. We have really nice, hard anthracite.
Just beautiful, clean coal.
Yeah, exactly. Beautiful, clean coal. And with technology and scrubbing technology the way it is now, I mean, pollution levels from coal, it's not like in the 1930s where, you know, you take a sample of a bird from the 1920s and 1930s and it's like 3 shades darker than if you take a bird.
I thought I heard that was a myth.
Wasn't that moths?
Yeah, it was moths, and I think
I
that I
thought
heard
it was
that
a
was a
bird.
myth. I don't know. Maybe it's.
I don't know. It was something they taught us in high school. That
I remember
wasn't,
learning that in
you
high
know.
school.
So I'm assuming it's real, but then assuming that my public school
It's giving you real
education was that good is, you know, walking on shaky ground. But as you said, India and China are hitting it harder than anyone else. China buys their coal from basically every country that produces coal. That would be Australia, the United States, Europe, Russia, everywhere that has it, they're buying it and storing it up and building new coal power plants. There was a few years ago when China was bragging publicly about all of the new solar panel energy plants that they've put in.
Right.
And in that same year, they put in something like 10,000 new coal plants were going forward.
Jeez.
So it was just kind of a humorous juxtaposition that they're bragging about how green they are, and everyone on the left is eating it up. You know, they're saying, "Oh, China is leading the pack in batteries and in green technology." Meanwhile, China is the world's largest coal consumer. They continue to produce more energy from coal than any other source. So it's just, it's unbelievable that.
Well, and they use slaves to make solar panels in factories powered by coal.
Isaac, you mentioned what Germany, you said, to make up for the energy lack of energy because of their nuclear plants, that they're actually starting another coal plant. Is that what you said earlier?
Yeah, they're low energy Jebs over there, and I don't know if they're starting another one right now, but they have just recently built a lignite plant, and lignite is like a low quality coal. It's basically flammable dirt.
No kidding.
Pretty cool though. So we got some sweet lignite out in North Dakota that powers Minnesota. So,
but this goes to that point that you brought up on this podcast probably a couple of times, but I've kept it in my mind forever, which is that Kuznets curve concept.
Yeah,
where it's like it doesn't matter what the regulations are, it doesn't matter what the laws are, what the stated agenda is to get to whatever goal by 2030. It doesn't matter what any of that is. It all matters about how well off the population that are supposed to be following these rules are. So when you're in a desperate position where you see your energy prices skyrocketing, costs you more money than ever to get to work, to fill up your car with gas, you don't care if it's supplied by wind and solar anymore. No, you need those prices to go down. I need coal. I need reliable energy. I need natural gas. Though that's what's going on in people's minds. So, and I think that the coal's resurgence is just kind of proof of that rule.
Well, and let's never forget that the coal issue is probably one of the major issues that tanked Hillary Clinton during her election.
Yeah, learn to code, coal miners or something.
Yeah, that was Biden actually that told them to learn to code. But Hillary Clinton basically stood in front of a small town in Pennsylvania and told them that they were going to end coal.
Put a lot of coal miners out of business.
Yeah. As if the people there would be in support of that.
God, what a gift.
I know. Well, we are running out of time. Jim, you have been fairly silent. Do you have any input on this last couple of topics that we've touched on?
No, just to underline the point that no matter what we do here in this country or any of the wealthy Western nations do to stop using coal and even natural gas, which is a lot cleaner than coal and very efficient, and to go to these unreliable wind and solar, no matter if we all did all of this and actually did it instantly tomorrow, and we all got into electric cars, it would not change the weather. It would not change it would not lower the temperature of what the Earth will be 100 years from now. And China will continue to do whatever it wants, which, as Isaac has just pointed out, is building more coal plants, tens of thousands of them, burning as much of the dirtiest coal they can get their hands on because it's cheap, because they care about that. It doesn't matter what we do. It won't have any effect on the climate. And it will just be committing economic suicide and leaving the future to China.
I saw this comment. Coal killed Hillary, LOL. Well, I will just say for the record, coal did not kill itself. So just keep that in mind.
Coal definitely didn't kill itself.
And I also will say that...
Wait, was that an Epstein joke?
What? No.
That's a
I'm
conspiracy
canceling
theory.
this. I am canceling this podcast right now.
Unsubscribe.
YouTube, take it down.
I will also mention that something that I have noticed that whenever I ask if somebody has a comment on something, they always lead off with no before giving their comments. It's happened 2 times in this episode. But anyways, we are running out of time, so I want to wrap up the show. So if anyone has any comments, anything they want to get off their chest, now is the time.
No.
Fantastic. Thank you, Isaac. All right, everyone. Thank you for tuning in to the In the Tank podcast. Join us every week for a new episode. If you're listening to the audio only, you're probably listening on a Friday. You can join us live on Thursdays, whether it's on Facebook or YouTube. You can join in the conversation, leave your comments or questions. Maybe we'll pop them up on the screen and respond to it. If you like our show, please subscribe, write a review for us on iTunes. It'd be greatly appreciated. If you're on YouTube, make sure to hit that subscribe button, leave a comment. All things that you can do that help this content and get in front of more eyes. If you'd like, you can follow us on the cesspool that is Twitter at In the Tank Pod. And if you have any comments, suggestions, or questions for the show, feel free to email us at inthetankpodcast@gmail.com. Jim Lakely, where can the fine people find you?
At Jay Lakely on Twitter, at Heartland Inst on Twitter, and always visit heartland.org.
Isaac Orr, same question.
Find me at The Fracking Guy on Twitter and at AmericanExperiment.org for my daily musings on energy.
Oh, fantastic. Linnea, where can the fine people find your stuff?
Well, they can find me at the Climate Realism site and also heartland.org. And maybe eventually Twitter. I'm thinking about it. But
don't do it.
Get
Wait,
her. Get
I
her.
don't know.
But isn't the Truth app coming out soon?
Yeah, get that. Get
Well,
anything else
maybe,
besides
yeah.
Twitter. Twitter.
I'm gonna get that
I
because
might.
that's Trump's own personal Twitter. So I can't wait for that. It's coming out on President's Day.
Fantastic. Oh, perfect. All right. Well, thank you all for tuning in. We will talk to you next week.